Hi guys, welcome to Counterpoints. My name's Connor. I'm a science fiction, politics, and philosophy nerd, and a Marine Corps and law enforcement veteran, and I would argue a real Republican. I'm going to be checking in on my favorite centrists who don't like to be called centrist. PSA Sitch and Adam Friended. They are, in my opinion, what the anti-social justice warriors should have evolved into. Although, in my opinion, Adam Friended rotted and twisted his brain into the most insane right-wing sweeping contrarian right bullshit I've ever seen in my entire life. And so we got some beef, and they also love to yap. So this is going to be a chill react. But Sitch, I would say, is like 90% based. He just doesn't attack his audience enough, but you know, who cares? Let's check it out. Oh, and sorry, topic is right-wing civil war. Are there enemies to the right?
Hello, everybody. Hope you're all doing well.
Happy Tuesday.
I got an echo apparently in the room here. It's almost time for Halloween.
It's almost time for Halloween.
So there was this interesting debate that came out a few days ago that I saw a lot of people clipped, but I don't think most people actually watched. And I just got around to watching it, and I was like, wow, this is actually a very good, interesting conversation. We should cover this on the show. So that's what we're doing right now.
Okay. Interesting. All right.
This is the Daily Wire. They're arguing or debating, very cordially debating, the group chat that got leaked to Politico that showed a bunch of people that were part of the various Republic.
Yes, we are doing Valor Reacts today at 1 p.m.
It was like the young Republican group, even though it was like 18 to 40-year-olds. A lot of them worked in the Republican Party and had various roles as staffers and such. And there's a lot of, like edgy jokes and maybe not so edgy jokes and things that seemed racist and things that were racist and blah, 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 blah. It kind of came out. All those people got in trouble. So they're having a conversation. They're having a debate about what the reaction should be to that. But more importantly than that group chat, because I don't think that group chat is very important. I think the broader question that's more important is, should political movements on both the left and the right draw a line in the sand where they say, hey, this is what our ideology stands for, and we're not going to join forces with people that are more extreme than us in some fashion? Is that an important thing for a political movement to do?
Delineate.
I mean, I think the argument for this is obviously yes. This is a healthy chunk of my content. This is a healthy chunk of Hutch's content, is that the far left, Zoran, I got Zoran Mamdani stands in my chat, but Zoran Mamdani being, in my opinion, a teddy bear version of Hassan Piker, and now he's got sock dem policies and he's going to win the mayoral race for New York City. That should be alarming to you. Now, you could say, oh, he's not going to be able to do his policies and he's going to moderate in order to attract more normies, and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. He'll be like AOC. Like, he'll start out as this crazy firebrand and he'll moderate into a progressive. Okay, sure, maybe. But at the same time, it should be alarming to you that the rhetoric of the far left is effectively, in my opinion, infiltrating the left wing. And so the same way that I'm alarmed by groypers, Christian nationalists, authoritarians, fascists, infiltrating the MAGA movement, taking over the MAGA movement, and then destroying the Republican Party, I think that you should be worried about the far left. So yes, in my opinion, it is moral to call out the extremes of your movement, obviously.
Its boundaries, its ideological no-go zones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which, now Michael Knowles makes his point, which I actually think is a good point to make, is if you're a political ideology and you don't draw boundaries about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, then how could you possibly even be a political ideology at that point?
Yep.
If you're just permissive of everything.
Right. Yeah. And then you're a progressive, right?
Well, not really, because they're not permissive of
hate speech and
so
all kinds of different things. But look, obviously, if someone on there, that's the problem with all these ideologies. It's like, here are the rules, and if one of our guys disobeys the rules, they're like super lenient. But if someone else disobeys the rules, they're like, fuck you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
God, I can't stand Matt Walsh. I really can't. I watched this.
Good. Finally, dude. Matt Walsh is such a piece of shit. All right. I waffle between being like, I hate Adam Friended and I must fight him, to, okay, that's like a reasonable take. And then I'm like, maybe we can be friends. I waffle between those two positions whenever I hear him talk.
So for a minute there, I thought, I'm going to start calling Republicans fascists.
Mm,
He drops the baby killers line, and I'm just like, okay, well, look, if they're
Right.
going to call us baby killers, then I think fascist is on the table. But
It's
he calls
funny-
himself a fascist. Like
Bro!
he's got theocratic fascist in his bio.
right,
So
right. Which comes up right in the beginning of this, which is interesting. It's funny. There's like a vibe that I guess Matt Walsh exudes that I think really rubs people the wrong way. Because even Sam, Sam's like, super pro Trump. She really does not like Matt Walsh.
yeah,
She hates Matt Walsh too. So
He's a douche.
well, Matt Walsh is just he wants to run your life, and it just
Yes.
totally rubs me the wrong way.
yes. Okay, so let's jump into this.
It was pretty spectacular. Good times, good times. Well, from that, I feel like should we talk about something serious? Matt, you
Yeah.
talk about something serious.
This has been far too much friendly small talk so far in this friendly fire. We got a lot of the friendly, but not the
Not
fire.
a lot of fire.
Yeah. So okay. So let's get into. I've been strictly instructed that the intros to these topics are supposed to be 2 minutes, but my primary and most reliable strategy in any debate is just to talk and not let anyone else. It's a filibuster. It's my only move. Politico. Let's talk about Politico. This is one of the big stories happening right now. And for anyone who's not familiar, Politico published a couple days ago this big hit piece revealing the private group chat conversation of some young Republicans. And the young Republicans are not elected officials. They're not anyone that anyone's even heard of for the most part. There's one person in the group chat apparently who works in the Trump administration who is not recorded having said anything. So he was in it, but as far as we know, he didn't say anything quote unquote offensive. But there were other comments made in the group chat, as Politico reveals, that were a lot of edgy jokes and a lot of offensive language that's being used in this group chat. And most of it, as Politico finally admits in the article, if you read all 57 paragraphs of it, they'll finally admit that, yeah, most of this is supposed to be a joke. Although they don't, of course, put that in the headline. And the title of the article has the quote, "I love Hitler." And when you look at the context of that comment in the group chat, it's very obvious that it is a joke. It's sarcasm, very much in line with the kind of sarcasm Republicans use all the time about, yeah, I'm real far right. I guess I love Hitler. Along the lines of me having theocratic fascist in my Twitter bio, which isn't entirely a joke, but it's mostly a joke.
So this
Yep,
is the
there it
problem.
is.
God, I hate this motherfucker.
Yeah, this is the exact problem with sort of, I have a lot of this stuff is, I mean, he just said it. I assume at first when he put theocratic fascist in his bio, yeah, it was some joke. Someone called him and I said, oh, you're this thing. And he's like, LOL, let me put it in the bio. But now by his own admission, he's like, well, maybe it's not so much a joke.
Yeah, exactly.
And you say, okay, well, what does that mean exactly? And you should be highly suspect of anyone in the political space who refuses to clarify and speaks very vaguely. It's the easiest thing. It should be the easiest thing in the world for someone to ask you a question and you to.
Ooh, like Dave Green. Although Dave Green, the distributist, we reviewed that the other day with Pisco. Pisco versus Dave Green. I would say that in my interactions with Dave Green 5 years ago, I think he was pretty obfuscating. He didn't want to be nailed down on anything. And then I would say in the Pisco conversation, there's a few times that I think that he was playing hide the ball with his ideas. But I think at the end, the last 40 minutes, he actually just came out and said, he's like, yeah, I want a Habsburgian, multi-ethnic Christian monarchy with some authoritarian elements, but the authoritarian elements aren't because I want mass slaughter. It's to hold together various peoples of different ethno-religious backgrounds. That way we prevent greater violence. I think that's what he said. And I would actually be interested in talking to Dave again and just being like, is that what you believe? Like, is that some hide the power level thing? Or do you think that that's what's necessary? Because, 5 years ago, you talked to me about Jewish power. You talked about impending race war. You talked about, progressives and leftists all secretly wanting to slaughter every normie that doesn't fall in line. So are you just hiding your power level because you actually want Hitler? Or do you want a Habsburgian, Central European, multi-ethnic, pseudo-authoritarian monarchy, kind of like Tito? Tito, I forgot Tito's first name, but he was the benevolent dictator of Yugoslavia. Obviously, he tortured people. Obviously, he imprisoned people. Obviously, he killed people. But compared to Joseph Stalin and compared to Hitler, he was an infinitely more benevolent ruler. And he also instituted like fairly sane policies. And so, is that what you're pushing for? Because while I would still find the authoritarianism nefarious, I would view it differently than I don't know, like an out and out ethno-nationalist, race realist, slaughtering, mass murdering authoritarian dictatorship.
Clarify. And I'm sure everyone's seen this a million times. There's some politician speaking, and everyone knows they don't want to answer some kind of question about some topic. And so they keep answering in this very vague way, or they keep trying to change the subject. And you're like, well, no, I'm asking about this very specific thing. Can you answer this very specific thing? Okay, did you do X? Did you support this? Did you do this? And they just don't want to answer it.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with political pundits. If they're just going to be vague and they're going to not clarify their position when literally it's their job to speak and to have opinions on these topics, to me, that's a very big red flag that either A, they believe the thing and they know they'll get in trouble for saying that, or B, they don't necessarily believe the thing, but they don't want to anger the group of people who does believe the thing.
Christian Blair says his first name is Joseph Bros. Nice.
They'd rather have their support.
Yeah. This is what everyone's always accusing the left of doing with the far left, which they actually
They all 100%
bring
are
up.
doing that. Yeah. They 100% are doing that and have been doing that for a very long time. And then now we get into this other issue, which is how many layers of irony are you on? Where you have a lot of people who are making jokes, and I'm sure a lot of the jokes are just sincere jokes, but for some people, they're not jokes. They're either sincere feelings or they're ways in which they're trying to sucker people down into believing more extreme views. And
this is another excellent point. This is why I like Sitch. There's a great video by Jreg, J-R-E-G. If you don't watch him, he does schizophrenic political YouTube videos, basically. And he did YouTube Jreg. If you want, I always confuse post-irony and meta-irony. So Jreg... you're probably
I pressed the button too,
virgin.
so I don't know if you actually pressed the button.
I didn't press the button.
So hold on, let me exit that real quick. Jreg post irony. He does this thing, and it's awesome. This one. So if you guys are confused by post irony or meta irony, you should watch this video. Effectively, what he does is he explains how irony or sarcasm is the way that people have operated up until the modern era. But once you get to meta irony and post irony, I think meta irony is where you're ironic for irony's sake to the point that you're effectively trying to confuse conversation just for comedic or satirical effect. Whereas like post irony is where you return to sincerity by being doubly sarcastic. So you say something like, oh yeah, really? I think we should kill the Jews. And normally, if you're taking that as sarcastic, then you would be like, oh, okay, he's joking. He doesn't actually want to kill the Jews. But in a post-ironic sense, basically you're returning to sincerity and you're actually saying like, oh, like Jewish power is a problem, therefore we need to be violent about it. And so effectively, I think this is it right here. Traditional satire, employing irony to point out and destroy or at least criticize a concept via its contradictions. Post-satire that employs meta-irony or post-irony instead of traditional irony. And again, like I said, that can be just used for comedic effect, or it can be used as a return to sincerity. So yeah, just be careful with it. That's all.
And you get into this, how much of the joke is really a joke space.
Yeah, no, it introduces a level of deniability.
Yes.
Which that's the problem with it.
Right.
I think this is why there's a prohibition on it a lot of times, is because people understand there's this level of deniability that they just don't want to deal with. They're like, let's just not say that, and then we don't have to wonder.
Patsimo says, where does Sam Hyde's Jews rock sketch land on the irony tier? I think that Sam Hyde defends his ability to say what he wants to say through meta-ironic humor. But I think that he might go to post-ironic commentary. So Jews rock Sam Hyde. I don't know if this will be too spicy to watch. 46 seconds. I can watch 46 seconds. Dude, so the whole so this is obviously post-ironic humor. But of course he's doing like a meta-ironic commentary, right? So this was back, I think this is where Sam Hyde had a show on Comedy Central, right? And so he was kind of doing like the Eric Andre absurdist humor. But then the whole reason why they're showing producers of the show doing this is because they're obviously like Adult Swim, thank you. They're obviously viscerally uncomfortable with this. Like they would probably be okay with the Chappelle Show doing, you know, like anti-black racist humor. Everyone's okay with anti-white racist humor. Everybody's okay, or some people will be okay with some Asian stereotypes, like good at math or bad at driving. And then and then with Hispanics, a lot of people either do like, you know, they're fertile, like they have lots of kids, or they jumped the border recently, or they eat spicy food or some shit like that. There's some kind of like racial humor that's just like broadly accepted within society. But it seems like as soon as you get to Jewish people, there's like a sensitivity. Now, the sensitivity is because, I don't know, a third of the Jewish population of the planet was wiped out 2 generations ago. So when you're using meta-ironic or post-ironic humor in order to create a show that's pointing out like this racial disparity, I understand why people would get uncomfortable. But these are executives. So if they created this as a bit where they made the executives of Adult Swim uncomfortable on purpose via meta-ironic commentary about like Jewish racial dynamics, man, that is brutal. That is brutal. I understand why he got fired. I also understand why people were mad that he got fired. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Wonder if you're serious or not, right?
Yeah. Yes. Well, it's weird too, because like, okay, there's a difference between like I have a group chat with my friends who, you know, I've known for, you know, years. We all have a pretty good sense of, you know, who the other person is. So there's a large level of
Yes. Happy Halloween, everybody. Happy Halloween.
Being comfortable to like make edgy jokes or to, you know, be racist towards each other too, which is very common in a lot of male friend groups where you're like, oh, I'm going to, you know, make racist comments about that person's race to them as a joke. And then they're going to make racist comments about, you know, my race or my ethnicity or whatever back to me in this kind of friendly manner because we all know each other. I think that's very different than this is a large group chat that has thousands of people in it that's part of a larger organization. This is not like your personal group chat.
Yeah. Yeah. But the internet obviously makes it feel more like you're just with.
Yep. Peril Zaz says, well, with the Jews, a lot of people are not joking, lol. I know. And I think that, I think with black folk or with Hispanic folk, the argument is that a lot of people are not joking as well. But I think that, you know, just add in the sensitivity of the Holocaust, man. A third of the global Jewish population was wiped out 2 generations ago. You can look at all the oppressions of black folk. But I don't think like what, you know, and of course, like there was mass torture and slaughter as a part of the chattel slavery in the Americas. So I'm not trying to minimize what happened in chattel slavery, but I don't think the population of black folk in the Americas was ever threatened where they might have culturally genocided them, but they didn't like physically genocide them. And then same thing with West Africa. I don't think the West African population of the world was ever in threat of being physically genocided. And same thing with Hispanics. You could argue that the indigenous people were culturally genocided. You could argue that they were kind of physically genocided through mixing of the Spanish colonists and the South American and Central American indigenous people. But I don't think that once that ethnogenesis was made, I don't think Hispanics have ever been at existential threat. Jewish folk have been at existential threat multiple times throughout history.
Intimate friends.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's what lulls people into occasionally doing dumb shit. But
of course, yeah.
It's ironic that Ben Shapiro is constantly called far right. I mean, there's probably 1,000 videos on Vosh's channel about how Ben Shapiro is so far right.
Yes, I'm going trick-or-treating. My youngest is 2. My oldest is 8.
And Ben Shapiro in this conversation is the one that's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't give in to the far right. Right?
Yes. In fact, I saw there's an interesting clip of Destiny spurging out about this conversation.
Really? Oh, interesting.
Because he's screeching at Ben Shapiro saying, oh my God, you're a hypocrite because you're so permissive of, the right being racists to everyone but Jews. The second that they're anti-Jewish, you jump in.
Where is Ben Shapiro being racist against black people? Where? That's ridiculous. Yeah. That's totally ridiculous.
Yeah, I know. But
I think when you deny systemic racist arguments and then you just make arguments that it's all culture, I'm not saying that's racist, but I am saying that other people see that as racist. And yeah.
So this is kind of this kind of breaks down a few different ways. And for me, the story here is not the group chat, because these are private messages between people that no one knows. These are not relevant people. And the only reason why the media is showing us this, the only reason why they're doing this is obviously it's a political hit. And in particular, they're trying to distract from the fact that the left has spent the last month, I mean, really much longer than that, but especially the last month, openly celebrating political violence. And now we have a
Starhawk says so. Ethnic replacement is a genocide, Connor. Eyeballs. Starhawk's one of our are you Romanian? I think you're Romanian. I can't remember, but so he's trying to say, oh, the conquistadors, in sexually enslaving the indigenous people of Mexico is the same as multiracial families in America. So let's take a look at this. Let's see if we can do this. Conquistadors. How do I type this without being super racist? Mixing with indigenous people. Conquistadors mixed with indigenous peoples through a combination of forced and consensual relationships, including rape, cohabitation, and legal marriage, which led to the creation of the mestizo people. So if you come over here with plate armor, muskets, and swords, and you say, hey, I will marry your daughter, right? And that's what you do, okay? That this is a situation where the church and what's effectively medieval knights right before the age of advanced rifles, like they had muskets and shit. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to pull up Spanish conquistador art. How about that? I think that'll be fine. Conquistador art. Okay, so this is a Spanish conquistador. And conquistador just means conqueror. So it's a guy with metal plate armor, a musket, and a sword conquering South and Central America. That's the lore of the conquistador, and that's the lore of the creation of the mestizo class of people. Now, let's look at a mixed race family from the Americas. Okay? Can you see a physical difference? Now, I understand that this is a black man and a white woman, which might make you feel some kind of way. But can you tell the difference between a European colonist in metal plate armor forcing Native Americans to sell their daughters to him for the purpose of procreation? Like, look at this. This is definitely a romanticization of the project of the conquistador, okay? But let's say there was probably a little bit more grape throughout history. So can you tell the difference between these two pictures? Between two people in a voluntary society engaging in a voluntary relationship resulting in mixed race children versus a guy in plate armor showing up to an indigenous society and saying, you must sell me your daughters? Can we tell the difference? Do we know the difference, or are we incredibly fucking stupid? And I'm sorry for cussing so much, but like the fact that you would be like, oh, racial genocide and voluntary race mixing are the same thing. I think it's one of the dumbest perspectives on the planet, particularly when you just look at the pictures of what you're talking about. So light-skinned black guy, random white chick, 3 happy kids, with, mixed features. Brown guy, white woman, mixed features. White guy, black woman, mixed features. But you're trying to tell me that's the same as a dude in plate armor, forcibly marrying indigenous people. I think that's fucking crazy. And I think that you should think it's fucking crazy too.
Attorney General candidate is probably going to be the next Attorney General of Virginia, who was in his own messages saying, not as a joke, that he wants his political opponents to die and even their children to die. And he was very specific that he was not joking about it. And so the left is looking to distract from that. And
I don't think this is a good argument because I think the bottom-up process matters. So even if it's a bunch of nobodies, if that's the feeling on the ground, it's good to know about it. I think a better argument
Am I dressing up? I don't know.
Is, this kind of thing happens in private chats on the right and it happens openly on the left. Obviously, when Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there's a bunch of really insane shit being said that probably should have been said in private, right? Not publicly, not broadcast to the world. So, yeah, I think that's a much better argument.
Yes, Andy B, you and I are of one mind. We just need aliens so humanity can be collectively racist to an outsider and everybody will get along. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, and also they're not nobodies. They are involved in the Republican Party. They are staffers. They are working with an organization that's supposed to cultivate people to work for the Republican Party. That's the whole point.
Well, look, if they're doing some sort of recruiting, then that's even worse because they're saying, look, to be a part of our organization, you got to love Hitler.
Right. And
that's not good.
I mean, it's possible that I don't know when Politico got the leak chats. So it's theoretical.
God, the dissident right people, man. Like, listen, Fatsimo and Starhawks, and we used to have this schizo who I forget his name now, but I can see his name. I can see his PFP. Systemic racism equals not passing basic tests as well as whites, so you get millions of dollars of civil rights acts towards lawsuits. No, that's not what it is. Starhawk said I was joking. Please don't destroy my butthole. All right. Sorry, Starhawks. I took you seriously. That's my autistic fault. But don't worry. I'll take Fatsimo. I'll take Fatsimo seriously as well. So let's do transatlantic slave trade. Let's do Reconstruction, American Reconstruction. Let's do redlining. Let's do in America. Bruh, I feel like we have like an elementary school like patty cake fucking lesson sometimes. Where you could just admit like reality. Like you could just look out of the world and be like, oh, this is inconvenient to my narrative. But realistically, yeah, that makes sense. But we have to do this. School segregation. Lol. All right, let's click on images. We love pictures here, folks. We love pictures. Okay, so systemic racism. I don't think that you can argue that before 1865 systemic racism wasn't a thing, because I think even the proponents of the slave trade would argue that it's systemic racism. They would argue that systemic racism was justified, that Africans were a different type of human being, and therefore they were more deserving of slavery. Therefore, due to their race, they should be chained, incarcerated, transported across the sea, allowed to die in cramped conditions in slave boats, and then forced to work agriculture. And if they try to escape, they'll kill them. So please, Fatsimo, admit that systemic racism existed until at least 1865, please, for the sake of my sanity. Okay. Now, arguably, Jim Crow and the Reconstruction South were also systemically racist in that they were segregationist societies. While black folk might have technically won legal equality after 1865, they were not treated as equals in 1866. They were moved into the ghettos of the Northeast and the Midwest. They were racially and socially segregated, and they were given poor employment. For an example, miners in the late 19th century, people who did the phosphate mines, people who did coal mines, they actually had a rule. no black union representative. Let's say you're a black guy and you're working the mines just alongside your white workers. And let's say that you even negotiate with the boss man in order to get the same pay as your white workers. And let's say you're even competent and intelligent and you get a union officer position, meaning that you are now in charge of the workers and you're in charge of negotiating the pay and conditions of other workers. There were laws throughout the country, and I guess laws might be the wrong word, but within the charter of many union jobs, late 19th century, early 20th century, black men were not allowed to be in charge of white men. And so they segregated the workers by color, specifically so a black man couldn't be in charge of a white man. So I would argue that that's systemic racism. Then redlining, of course, is intentional segregation by private organizations in order to racially segregate cities. So if you were black, you couldn't really buy on the correct side of town. And by correct side of town, I just mean the nice side of town. You couldn't really buy on the nice side of town because private real estate owners wouldn't sell it to you because of your race. You could argue that's not the state, that's private stuff. But if it's a system might imply governance, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is. And then you have to understand, my parents were born in 55. So schools were desegregated. When were schools desegregated? Schools were desegregated in 54. When my parents were born, that's when black kids were allowed to go to schools with white kids. So again, like, if you want to argue, okay, well, in the modern era, there isn't a government endorsed system. Sure, whatever. Like we can split hairs, but I don't really give a shit. But if you think that generationally, the 4 or 5 things that I just showed you, transatlantic slave trade was absolutely systemic racism. Reconstruction era segregation was absolutely systemic racism. And then all the way through school desegregation and the Civil Rights Act, we had systemic racism in this country. So if you just want to pretend like, oh, well, within 2 generations, we should fix it, I think you're fucking crazy. Anyways, sorry for the yap, but you guys know I love the yap. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Thank you to Fast and Bulbous and Gen X for kicking in the super chats today. Let's go.
Theoretically possible that they were sitting on them, waiting for the opportune time. They're like, okay, now we have to distract away from this attorney general story. Like, I guess it's possible. I think it's not very likely, though. I think they just released it.
Dropped them when they had them. Dropped them when they confirmed
I think
they
they
were
dropped them
real
when
and
right.
checked in on the people.
Usually
sure they
these
weren't just anonymous people.
Yes, usually these organizations are very horny to drop things like this.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, like, I don't mind people comparing them because obviously, yeah, it's pretty completely insane.
Look up Conquistador Rule 34. No. Bad Fast and Bulbous. Bad. Down, boy.
That you had this attorney general running in Virginia who was not kicked out of the Democrat Party. It was denounced, but was not just like kicked out of the Democrats that were, okay, we're just completely drawing support from you whatsoever, which they should have done. And then all the people, obviously, that were cheering on Charlie Kirk, who were not politicians, but still just kind of unhinged. I don't have a problem with people like talking about that, talking about the context of the political situation we're in, but it's very different than the pivot, sort of like tribal reaction, this emotional defense to pivot to the.
Rob says, dog, Pocahontas loved John Smith. I reject the woke libtard smear of the conquistadors. Bruh. I know you're fucking with me, but holy crap. If Asimo said that, you would have hurt me psychically.
Whataboutism of, well, what about what this other side did? You know, we can't denounce our side because the other side did something bad, which is sort of the direction that Matt's taking this. And I mean, I hate to bring it up again, but it does remind me of the entire position that Destiny had regarding Charlie Kirk, where he kept arguing this on Piers Morgan and everywhere, that he would not denounce the people that were.
Rob says mixed features, aka feature maxing, based. Whenever somebody's talking about like, oh, white genocide, you know, that we're increasingly mixing our races, and therefore Northern Europeans will no longer be an ethno-religious group, blah 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 blah. I'm gonna be like, no, we're just feature maxing. If we didn't have conquerors breeding themselves out of existence, we wouldn't have the Indian caste system. What? What?
We're calling for violence or we're cheering it on because the other side wouldn't do it. And he's like, well, I'm not going to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah. It was whatever 4690. That's what it was. Yep. Whatever 4690. You know, everybody pour one out for the dissident right-wing homie, whatever 4690, who got so fucking annoying. Eventually I had to ban him, even though we kept him as our resident schizophrenic dissident right-wing pet for a while. Pour one out for whatever 4690.
Right thing. And, you know, we both argued that's the completely insane mentality to have. It's just going to make everything worse. And so this is exactly the same mentality of, well, we need to unify. We can't denounce our side or denounce the bad actors on our side because the other side is worse.
Yeah.
And their way of doing it is by somehow obtaining these messages and putting them out to distract us. And, you know, some Republicans have been very quick to offer their denunciations to say how offended they are, how horrible these messages are, that everybody involved should be fired, that they should never be allowed in politics again. I think that response is foolish. I think it gives the left exactly what they want. I have really appreciated J.D. Vance's response. Now, I think the vice president has struck exactly the right chord on this because he's not going to play the game. And instead, what he's done is he has redirected the conversation back to the thing that the left is trying to distract us from. There's one reason and one reason only that this story exists, and it's to get us to stop talking about Jay Jones and the leftists who've been celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk for the last month. That's the only reason that the story exists. And so J.D. Vance's point is, no, I'm not going to play that game with you. I'm not going to give you what you want. Instead, I'm going to redirect the conversation back to the thing that you're trying to distract us from. And I think that that's exactly the right move. I think there's some disagreement about that, though. There's more to be said about it. But I'm going to go first to the guy who I think is most likely to agree with me, and that is Michael. Michael.
Well, you're right, Matt. I totally agree.
Was it the swastika on his forehead?
Yes. Hey, listen, we're Italian, and Mussolini, he was a complex figure. My only take on this that probably has not been said elsewhere is even the fact that we're talking about the ideology of the far right and comparing the far right to the far left and, you know, whether or not people like Hitler or whatever is actually kind of missing the point. I strongly suspect these messages were leaked by another young Republican that has been reported. And having spent a lot of time with New York young Republicans, I promise you this whole thing is about some like petty personal grudge, and it's some power play within New York politics, and it actually has very little to do with the ideology or putative ideology of these texts. But I totally agree. There is no comparison whatsoever between some 19-year-old kid who's making edgy jokes trying to outbaste his friend in a group chat and a former state legislator, would-be top law enforcement official in Virginia, saying, as you note, Matt, that he is not joking when he calls for the death of his opponents and even the death of their children. So yes, not at all. Now the question then becomes, should we ever police our own? Should we ever have guardrails, or do we say anyone, you know, to the right of Hillary is on our side? And I think the answer is obviously yes, there have to be guardrails, just like a nation.
A sane statement? A sane statement from Michael Knowles? Wow.
Is circumscribed by its border, so too a political coalition is circumscribed. That's what delineates it as a specific coalition. But if the question is, how are we going to arrive at those guardrails? Are we going to say that anyone who ever, you know, gets caught telling an off-color joke by Politico, they're completely...
Oh, yeah. Okay, and then like I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm really not. Really not that big of a conspiracy theorist. But listen, man. Oh, and by the way, this song, Terminator, Salvation soundtrack, 9 Inch Nails, The Day the World Went Away. Amazing. I love that song. Seriously. It's so good. But anyways, what I wanted to show you was American Made trailer. Okay. So the argument, which I think is very stupid, is that Barry Seals and the CIA knowingly, willingly, and intentionally trafficked cocaine and crack cocaine into the United States with the express purpose of destroying the black community, because the CIA of the middle 20th century, like the American government, just hates black people. Okay, that's like the argument. Whereas what I think is more likely is that drugs are incredibly profitable and lots of people, and so as a result, people found it profitable to traffic drugs into the United States. And during the narco terror wars of the late 20th century, the CIA used drugs as a funding opportunity for, let's call them asymmetrical freedom fighters, asymmetrical anti-communist freedom fighters in South and Central America. They use drugs to fund the South. So my expectation, what I think is true, is that whatever the CIA did in reference to the drug trade, whatever the United States government did in reference to the drug trade, was probably a cynical Machiavellian attempt to fund capitalist, anti-communist paramilitary organizations in the South and Central America. And if you compared what the government either knew about, condoned, or assisted with, it is probably a drop in the frickin' ocean compared to the rest of the drug trade. However, if you're a conspiracy theorist, then you could make the argument that the drug trade was brought in specifically to keep the black man down, and that mass incarceration, that first the federal government was like, we hate black people, therefore we're going to give them a bunch of drugs so we destroy their communities. And then mass incarceration was the follow-up move, where after they got black folk hooked on the drugs, then they used mass incarceration to punish black people so they could rip black folk out of the home, rip black men out of the home, and mass incarcerate them so they could, I don't know, have less stable families or some shit. I don't fucking know. I don't believe that shit. I think there's plenty of other reasons besides intentional racism for these things to occur. But if you wanted to steel man along with entertaining conspiracy theories, that would be a way that you could entertain conspiracy theories into the modern era about systemic racism.
Completely cast into the outer darkness. No, I don't think that's right. I think we should have guardrails. We should police a coalition. And the way we should do it is very carefully. This was Scalia's answer when, as a student, we asked him, hey, where do you draw the limits on the Second Amendment? Where do you draw the limits on stare decisis? And everyone wanted a really ideological answer. And his answer was, very carefully. We kind of know, we're prudent, it's a people business. And should these kids have their lives ruined because they were mouthing off and telling jokes in a group chat? No, I don't think so. I think
we're not prudent.
So, well, there's two issues. There's the group chat and there's the broader point. And I think the group chat is not really that important overall, except in terms of like I guess last thing I have to say about it is in terms of like the strategy that Matt Walsh lays out, like, is it strategically better?
So, anonymous chatter, I'm actually going to ask this because I genuinely don't know. Even by today's standards, funding public schools through property taxes creates a cycle of poverty where poor areas have worse schools and lead to less economic activity and prosperity. So in the state of Florida, this is like a common talking point. But in the state of Florida, all the funding goes to the state, and then there's a equal dollar amount that is given per student that is then redistributed back to the public school system. So I don't know if that stands, at least in the state of Florida. Do property taxes pay for schools? Yes, property taxes are a major source of public funding for schools, with local property tax revenue covering a significant portion of school budgets across the United States. The local funding is used for a wide range of school needs, including teacher salaries, building maintenance, and student programs. However, reliance on property taxes can create funding disparities between districts because of the amount of revenue a district can generate is tied to its property values. So I'm just curious. The Florida state system, they send it all to the state, and then they have an equitable distribution based off of students. Do you know of a state where that's not the case, where it's not like an equitable distribution? I would be curious for like a modern example.
For Republicans and J.D. Vance to not denounce it, but to just do a whataboutism pivot. Now, it's funny because he didn't call it whataboutism, but he called it a redirect, but it is.
Xena says, Connor, if you ever stop yapping, this relationship is over. Based. I love you guys too. Like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them, memberships if you got them. Thanks for hanging out. I hope you have a good time.
The whataboutism, but whataboutism pivot to talk about, the attorney general guy in Virginia or Charlie Kirk or something like that. Is that actually politically effective? I don't think
is it a dodge though? I mean,
it depends, because if you say, and this is where I think the distinction is important, if you say, like, I don't support that kind of language, and we don't welcome, Nazism or pro-Hitler speak in the Republican Party, but this is not that important to the conversation, the national conversation, and this is really a distraction from the more important conversation, which is, and then you go to like the whataboutism with the attorney general. To me, that would be like the actually good political strategy, because you'd be solidifying your position, you'd be solidifying your party, and you'd also be sort of you'd be escaping from the whole like, okay, well, you're just covering for this stuff because you really believe it, because you're clearly denouncing it, and then you also move to the issue, the pivot to the issue, what about the issue that you want to focus on. That's very different than just not even denouncing anything whatsoever and then just immediately whataboutising him, because that just is going to allow the other side to say, well, look at that, he's not actually addressing the issue, he must actually be in favor of it.
Right. Yeah. I don't know what JD Vance's response was, so I don't know if he said exactly what you laid out or if he just
hand waved it away. He said like, oh, I'm not going to be engaged in this pearl clutching, when the attorney general said, these really bad things.
I have a hard time I have a hard time doing a bunch of finger wagging here on the private chat conversation. So I mean, obviously it is indicative of, I mean, you look to it as, is it indicative of the cultural environment that we're in now?
Right.
Yeah. And is it a one-off? Is it pervasive? Is this like one person? So, but I was thinking about this in the context of like, where is it okay to like start wagging your finger? And I'm not sure it's a good political move for JD Vance to come out and start wagging his finger. I mean,
okay, they're talking about political efficacy, but I swear to God, okay, you guys know me. I'm a little bit homophobic, but I have gay friends and bisexual friends, and I think we can break bread on the fact that, love who you love, be a good person, pay your bills, take care of your community, whatever, and we can be friends. And let's be friends, matter of fact. I think you guys know I'm a little bit racist. I point out, statistical disparities in criminality amongst communities. I point out cultural trends that I dislike. I point out all that stuff, and some of that stuff could be argued to be racist. However, I also have Black and Hispanic friends, and I love them, and I want them to do well. And I'm happy that I live in a plural American society in which I can have brothers and sisters who are different ethno-religious and racial backgrounds than me. So I'm a little racist, sure. But Adam saying like, oh, I don't know when we can wag fingers. If he's talking about political efficacy, I understand it descriptively. But I've said like a few edgy racist things on the Sitch and Adam show, and Adam's been like, oh, whoa, that's just racist. That's just racist. And it's like, was that not finger wagging, Adam? Were you not moral frogging about my spicy hyperbolic commentary? I find it rich coming from him. Now I need some water, so I'm gonna go get water. So enjoy this commentary. Let's go.
If he said it the way that you said it, where he's not basically condemning anyone, he's just saying, look, we don't welcome that stuff.
Condemning the concepts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's way better.
Right.
That's way better, more politically astute, obviously. So, and a better strategy. You don't want, look, right now, Republicans are on the top of the world because they're not doing the finger wagging. They've completely painted the Democrats as kings of the finger wagging. So I agree that they do need to police the far right to some extent, but they have to do it in a way that's politically smart.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I mean, right now there was a lot of finger wagging about Charlie Kirk. It was just you and I perceive it as warranted finger wagging.
Yeah, that's the difference. Yeah,
right, exactly. And I agree with you.
Like, is it finger wagging if you're endorsing political violence? Like, is it finger wagging when we're talking about the trans issue where kids are literally being castrated? Is that finger wagging? Just
means to reprimand someone. Right. I know it has like a negative connotation to it, as if it's like an undeserved, but
it does. Yeah. I mean, when I'm saying finger wagging, I'm thinking of, just needless busybodies getting into people's business, policing things that are really none of their business. Right.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I agree with you in terms of this group chat. I mean, I'm always skeptical of something I can't see the entirety of. And I don't believe, I read the Politico article, but I don't believe they released the whole chat for anyone to go through.
Yeah, of course not.
To it in the article. And so I did see a lot of things, and it's like, I don't know what the context that any of these things are, how much of this is jokes, how much of this is not jokes. Some of the things stood out to me as like clearly joking. A couple of them where I was kind of like on the fence about like, okay, maybe, but I'd like to see some additional context. So yeah, I agree in terms of the specifics of the chat group. It's not really worth getting into. But what you said, which is really important, is where are we currently right now? What is the environment?
Yeah, exactly.
And the environment that we're in right now, at least online, is that the far right ethno-nationalist movement is becoming more and more popular every day. Multiple people on the right have said that it's becoming more and more popular every day. Nick Fuentes comes out, he has a but he has a podcast on Spotify and it hits #1 in 24 hours. And so they have to remove it and kick him off the platform. You know, anything with him in it gets millions of views and comments. And it's becoming very, very increasingly popular to the fact that the mainstream right, which the Daily Wire definitely is, can't, and I don't think any mainstream right organization that's on the internet at least, can't just pretend like these are a bunch of nobodies that they don't have to interact with anymore. There has to be an actual interaction or an actual acknowledgement and denouncement of this. Otherwise, you're just going to recreate the 2015 scenario where the alt-left takes over the mainstream left because the mainstream left is too afraid to talk about them until it's too late, until they're too afraid.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think Ben provides some ancillary evidence that's far better than the group chat. He's like, my death threats from the right are off the charts right now.
Yes.
So
which is, I didn't know that Ben's getting very consistent death threats from, the far right.
Yeah. And look, the Groypers were all over Turning Point USA. They did not like Turning Point USA.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Fuentes was even saying, the grouping of Turning Point USA will continue. And all this stuff.
No.
His response to the group chat was to say like that, that more Groypers should be infiltrating the Republican Party, but they need to just be more smart about it and hide their power level. So
yeah, why are you going to unite with the side that is actively against you? I think they bring this up in here too.
They do. Yeah. Why are you going to side with a group of people who maybe on some short term you're like, okay, we can get votes, which is not really even clear that that's going to translate into votes, but is at the end of the day.
Andy BC says the thing that with redlining, you either have to argue is purely racist or purely risk adverse. Lower income populations are higher risk not to not pay back loans. It was probably both. Okay.
Seeking to subvert you and take you over and replace you, supplant you.
So, I mean, here's the thing. We're just not. I mean, so I would agree with you that quote unquote policing, you need to be prudent about how you police. I also think that everyone agrees, I would assume, Matt included, and Matt, you told me if I'm wrong.
Red Hat says, starting my World Eaters Army, building a Helldrake while watching stream. Based.
Here, that there are certain things that can be said that social consequences should actually attend to. Certainly that's true on the left, right? If you say that you want to murder the Speaker of the House and then calls the kids fascist, there should be social consequences that actually attend to that. I agree with everything you say about the difference between a private group chat between a bunch of young Republican idiots who are outbasing each other and the attorney general candidate in Virginia actually saying the thing running for office. Now, I will say, I don't think these people are kids. I don't think 31-year-olds.
Did they talk about Destiny's argument here? I must have missed it. I was using the restroom. Star Oxford 5 says, I'm American, but was born in Serbia but I was in Serbia for a wedding recently. Happy Halloween to you in chat. Oh, based. Thanks, Starhawks. Appreciate you.
Kid, I don't like using the sort of language of kids to describe people who really should be married and have children of their own by this point.
True.
In their life. And
I love that he comes in here with this. He's like, what the fuck, kids? Kids.
Yes.
You should have kids. Grow up.
And I think the kind of loose playing with that term, as though if you're a 31-year-old, which is what one of these people was, that somehow this is the equivalent of being 17. I don't think that's true either.
But the YRs go down to 22.
I agree, but some of the people who are being quoted here are in their 30s, some are up all the way up to 40.
What about the Epstein files? The Republicans swept it. They swept it. They said, there's a nothing burger. And then they waited for Charlie Kirk to get shot. And then they were like, nobody cares about Epstein anymore. And then they stopped talking about it. Vast and Bulbous for 5 says, Matt Walsh is going to be so mad when Trump demolishes the West Wing to make a call center for USHA because JD's infidelity. Damn, bro. Get a little spicy today, don't you think it?
Again, I'm not even disagreeing with the motivations of the Politico story. In fact, even on my show today, I talked about the motivations of the Politico story, which, Matt, I agree, are completely scurrilous and designed to distract from the sort of violent rhetoric.
Wow, man says, I'm taking a 14-hour flight to Japan tonight, and I'm dealing with a little bit of heartburn. Does anybody have any advance for not suffering on the flight? Yes. Number 1, Pepto-Bismol will shut down your stomach. So number 1, you should probably get like Nexium. So Nexium is over the counter. It's a something proton pump inhibitor, something like that. It'll shut down your stomach. So that's good. It'll take about 10%, 20% off of her. Now, I would recommend just getting Nexium in general. Unfortunately, I've been on Nexium for like 5, maybe 10 years now. I probably will have osteoporosis as I get older, but that's part of the reason why I lift weights, because lifting weights is good to prevent osteoporosis. But Nexium doesn't have super, super negative physical effects, and it's largely just osteoporosis. So take a bunch of calcium, lift a bunch of weights, you'll probably be fine. Now, let's say that you just want a one-off solution. Number one, Pepto-Bismol is really good at shutting down your stomach for like gas, diarrhea, all that kind of crap. And it kind of like coats your stomach in something to shut everything down. However, what I like for a one-off solution is 2 Tums and 2 simethicone. All right. Also known as Gas X. All right. I'm an old man. This is well thought advice I'm giving to you right now. All right. So 2 Tums. Tums are calcium carbonate. They'll basically chill out that acid burny feeling. However, oftentimes when you're in pain, the reason why you're in pain is not because of the acid burning feeling, it's because of gas. And so for gas, what simethicone does, a ER doctor swore by it, okay? He said that simethicone goes into your stomach and it effectively evaporates the gas bubbles. I don't know how, but he says that he watched it on an ultrasound and it was borderline miraculous how powerful simethicone can be. So pop 2 Gas X, pop 2 Tums, take Pepto-Bismol if you need to, get on Nexium if you need to. There's my heartburn advice. Let's go.
We've seen from the left, but it has led to, I think, a reactionary response on some parts of the right to say there should be no policing ever at all. No social consequences should ever attend to things that are said on the right, that it's basically just pure my side versus your side. The problem I have is, number one, I think it's moral, and number two, I don't think that's pragmatic. I don't think that's moral because I think that there are things that get said on the right that are really, really, really ugly, and pretending those away doesn't make them go away. I think that they're rising. I think common. I know that my death threats from that side are getting more common. I know I have more security because of that, and it's not just from the left. I have lots of security from the left, and I also get lots of security from the right. Matt, I think a little bit earlier today you tweeted that kind of your litmus test is the people who are trying to kill you, and I totally get that. I also have that litmus test. The difference is that I think that if somebody tries to kill you, Matt, there's a good shot that it's going to be a leftist. If somebody tries to kill me, it's a freaking Agatha Christie novel. I just don't know which direction the bullet is coming from at this point.
True.
Given the sort of various and sundry radical extremes that exist. I'm not going to say that the right is equivalent to the left in this respect, because I don't think it's been mainstreamed to nearly the same effect on the right that it has been on the left. But to pretend that it has not infiltrated a lot of very important spaces, I think is sort of whistling past the graveyard. Now, again, that's not.
This is why so many Jewish people have to be on the left, have to be Democrats right here. Exactly what Ben Shapiro is talking about, because that's, I mean, if you have conservative intuitions, moral intuitions, but you're in a group that is constantly talking about the Jews, that's got to be difficult.
True, bro. So sorry, I know this is obvious, but hey, got to do some transformative commentary, right? As a theocratic fascist, tongue in cheek, for Matt Walsh and Michael Knowles don't have to worry about anti-Semitism. If the Christian nationalists get into power, if the Christian theocrats get into power, they don't have to worry about shit. I don't know if Klavan is Jewish. But obviously Ben Shapiro is Jewish, and a devout Jew, and an open Jew, and a social conservative, and a fiscal conservative. And yet, there are vast swaths of the right wing, maybe not vast, but I would say increasingly loud swaths of the right wing, that are hostile not just to the state of Israel, but to Jewish power in general. You have to understand, Tucker Carlson was a very large, and still is a very large, conservative commentator, and he just had Nick Fuentes on and gave him a softball interview. Nick Fuentes is open about the fact that he wants to dispossess Jews from social and political power. So yeah, I would find that super fucking alarming. I would find the left wing cozying up to terrorist organizations via people like Hassan Piker terrifying, but I would also find Nick Fuentes being normalized scary as fuck as well, if I was Jewish, which I'm not, for the record. Anonymous Chatter says, even if the intentions were the coke crack drug wars were systemic racism, it doesn't change the fact that it disproportionately affected the black community. Yeah, we can do a consequentialist analysis, but I think that Fatsimo and Ben Shapiro and other people, they argue intent, because as an example, let's just say let's say that the way that we run our society right now is that black people disproportionately get seatbelt tickets, which I'm pretty sure is true, by the way. Okay. And, but wearing a seatbelt is not, racism, it's a cultural thing. In the 1980s, I think seatbelt usage was around 20%. And then due to enforcement, I think that seatbelt usage has jumped up to like 80%. Like click it or ticket is actually an example of where the state using force in order to change cultural norms actually worked. So as a result of click it or ticket, which like started in the late 80s, we have substantively reduced traffic fatalities and we've substantively increased seatbelt usage. Well, the Black community has lagged in reference to seatbelt usage. So if Asians increase seatbelt usage, if whites increase seatbelt usage, if Hispanics increase seatbelt usage, and even Black folk increase seatbelt usage, but the effect was only half that in the Black community, you can still say, oh, well, this is racist because disproportionately Black folk get tickets for seatbelts. It's not that fucking hard, dude. Take the fucking strap, click it into the goddamn hole. You know what I'm saying? So at that point, is it because the system is racist? Is it because there's an intentionality on the system side? Or is it because there's some cultural bullshit where, I don't know, young Black men don't want to comply with seatbelt usage laws? I don't know, bro. I don't know. But I wouldn't call click it or ticket a racist policy.
Yeah, well, like, obviously, for most of my life, the whole like talking about the Jews thing was very relegated to like the
Groovy Harp says every news story that hurts my side was purposefully released as the product of a conspiracy to divert attention away from news stories that help my side every time. Bro, not only is that an amazing, we should just have that on standby so we can just tweet that every other day. But but that reminds me of the meme where somebody was making fun of Nick Fuentes, and I'm not saying that this is true, but it was a funny meme. It was like, all you need to know about Nick Fuentes is that he was caught with gay porn on his phone and he blamed the IDF. and I think what that really was somebody, they say it's fake. I don't know if it's fake or true or not, but allegedly it was Nick like flipping through his phone, and it was like a screen recording of his phone, and there was a URL that popped up, and there was like a little bit of, let's just say some hip. There was some pornographic-y thumbnail, and somebody copied the URL and posted it into their phone, posted it into their internet, and they screen recorded their internet, and it was like trans porn. And then I think that Nick said, "Oh, it's fake. It's a deep fake, whatever." And it's being promoted by Israeli intelligence in order to defame me. And I think that's so funny. There was another meme that was very similar to that spirit, which is like, "Oh man, I can't believe the IDF made me participate in that meth-fueled gay orgy." Oh man, the Mossad made me do that meth and have homosexual sex and videotape it. Oh man, that's gonna be the Trump defense, huh? The Trump defense was like, yeah. I went to the pedophile island, but it's the Mossad's fault. I might be enjoying that too much. I just think it's really funny. Ah, fuck. All right, back to it.
far tiny extreme ends of the conversation of the far right.
Right.
It was not something that I would ever interact with or see on any level unless I went looking for it. And then now that's completely changed. Now it's completely changed. Right. So you can any internet social media post or any YouTube video or anything like that, where there's any subject matter that has anything to do with Jews or Israel, there's going to be a bunch of comments, talk about how bad the Jews are and how the Jews are behind everything or something. So it's definitely spread. But yeah, I mean, I'm assuming for most of Ben Shapiro's life, it was the same thing. I think, I don't know, how old is Ben Shapiro? I think he's only a little bit older than me. But, oh, never mind, he's 41. Okay, so he's more a little bit older than me. But for most of Ben's life, I'm sure he was in the same camp, that he was conservative and he never really interacted with people hating on him for being Jewish or anything like that. It's sad and interesting that that's kind of what it takes for most people to sort of.
Okay. Some people were exploring the nuances of property taxes, and they were effectively saying that what was I thinking? That with the states, even with the equitable stuff, there was some like nuanced things there as far as like how the money gets distributed. Some people were talking about like administrative costs and all that jazz. And then Vastly Blank says, when a district in Texas wants a CapEx improvements like repairs or new facilities, They must pass a bond to cover that cost, which is a tax levy on that district. Poor areas can't support those tax increases. That's interesting. So if you wanted like a new stadium or a better sports facility or better extracurriculars or whatever, then that would be a local district funding measure rather than a state level funding measure. That makes sense. Anonymous Chatter says, if I recall, Kentucky is a state that doesn't have equitable school spending. I will look it up for you later at work. No, it's not a big deal, man. You don't need to look it up. I just think that I think the reason why people push back on the school spending stuff, so for instance, Fatsimo just said it a few seconds ago, so I guess I should address it, is that you could go to Baltimore. Baltimore has some of the highest per student funding in the United States, and yet they have some of the worst educational outcomes in the United States. And then somebody mentioned Chicago as well. Chicago has insane public education funding, and yet, they still have really terrible outcomes. And one of the things that people brought up in chat was that it is how the resources are allocated. So for instance, if you just take all that additional funding and then you just put a bunch of administrators in order to watch a bunch of other administrators who are in charge of teachers, clearly that's not fulfilling the mission of teaching kids to be successful in America. Whereas one of the stats that somebody brought up that I think is actually relevant is they said that teacher to student ratios are one of the most important stats when it comes to educational outcomes. I know that's true. I think when I was coming up, I went to a private school, but I also went to a public school. When I went to a public school, they had a law that said that you could only have like 20 students per teacher or 22 students per teacher. But because of an influx and redistricting, they temporarily allowed school classes sizes to increase. And as a result of that like temporary levy, it was like 40 kids per class, 50 kids per class. And the teachers, they weren't teachers anymore. They were basically test administrators. The only way that a teacher could command the attention of a room of 50 was if they were administrating a test that was necessary for the grade of the class. If there's 50 kids, you can't interrupt all the back massages and note passing and people getting into fights and people arguing with each other and people whispering and people passing each other drugs. There's no way for like a single teacher, especially in the 2000s, there's no way a single public school teacher could police 50 students. The ratio is just off. So, yeah.
Wants to police their own side or to have that sort of revelation is that like as soon as they're attacked by people, like as soon as they're attacked by their flank, they're like, oh, I have to actually, be aware of this. As long as you're not attacked by your flank, it's very easy for people to just be dismissive, to emotionally be dismissive of it.
True. Good observation, Sitch.
First of all, thank you, JMac, for the 50 gifted memberships. Very generous.
50 gifted memberships. Jesus Christ. I wish I hadn't pissed off JMac. I think JMac, to his credit, love me some JMac. JMac donated a lot of money to the Hurricane Ian relief thing. I think he did like $1,500 or like $2,000. So JMac, shout out to him. Thanks for supporting me during the Hurricane Ian thing. But he oils the fuck out of Sitch and Adam, bro. I'm lucky to have Sitch and Adam, Patriarch, Dr. Zayas, Gen X, Numinax, Anonymous Chatter, Fast and Bulbous, Starhawks today, Fast and Bulbous, Starhawks, Gen X, and Fast and Bulbous again. So I'm lucky to have the people that I have. But man, JMac is an oiler.
You welcome new members. Also, the Justice 35 member for 37 months, obviously a fan of Sitch and Adam that's on the left, has a chat here, a member chat that I think is pertinent because this is one of the best reasons not to give in.
Yeah, Ben Shapiro said that Hickernell calling them kids is very dumb.
To the far right, because it allows people like the Justice 35 to say, yep, I told you so.
Right.
He says, wow, the mainstream right acting as a pipeline to racist beliefs? Never. Who could have foreseen this based on conservative rhetoric for the last 40 plus years? So look, there is a narrative war going on here right now. And this is why they published the group chat.
Arigatou gozaimasu, akimashite, sumimasen, aka batasoi. Batusai, aka Batasai. Connor, do you own a set of power armor and a helmet? You could trick or treat with a bolter. I would if I wouldn't get arrested. straight up. Like I have Imperial Guard armor. I could probably throw on my Imperial Guard armor and my utilities, and I would walk around. I do have a chainsword. I could walk around with a chainsword. Have I ever shown you guys my chainsword? I'm gonna show you my chainsword real quick. YouTube has rules against showing you guys firearms, but I don't think they have any rules about a chainsaw sword. Let me show you. Oh. This is the next project, okay? um Wouldn't it be awesome if they changed the terms of service just for me? They're like, you can no longer play with a chainsaw sword on stream. But that is an M18 Milwaukee cutter, something. It's like it's the shortest electric chainsaw they have, and the blade is normally 8 inches. I bought the largest blade that I could fit on it is 18 inches. So I have an 18-inch hand chainsaw. I need to paint it, and I need to 3D print a scabbard, like a cover, because they have a cover. And yeah, that'll be one of my next projects, obviously. Anyways, just wanted to show you my chainsaw sword. Back to it.
Because obviously the people on the left want the narrative to be that all Republicans are greedy racists. That's the narrative that they're pushing. And they, if they can find any evidence of that, they're obviously going to publish it.
I think the problem with
Nexium causes autism. Oh, absolutely.
Any political ideology, people that are into politics, you're going to have a disproportionate number of people that are extremists that are into politics than you are in the normie population, right? Because people that have
Andy B says, I'm tired of pretending Erica Kirk wouldn't make me risk it all. If I was JD Vance, that would be my strongest battle. Nice. Thanks for the honesty.
very extreme views and are animated about those views are going to get into politics, while the average person is not. If they're very moderate views, they're not going to be animated by that. Now, again,
oh yeah, Florida's an open carry state. That's true. It's true. I think we did change to open carry recently. That's interesting.
And I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying that the majority of politics have extreme views. I'm just saying the majority of people that have extreme views are going to gravitate towards politics. And I think because of that, you get in the situation where any political ideology, doesn't matter what it is, left or right or whatever, any political party, there's always going to be a pull on it into that direction. Any political party can devolve into a pipeline for radicalism as long as there's not strong borders, as Michael Noll says, or strong gatekeeping that is activated by the party itself, by the ideology itself, to prevent people from slipping down into more radical.
True. And what I would say is that Nick Fuentes has infiltrated that barrier network. Nick Fuentes' internet popularity has made him unignorable. I do not think that America First / Nick Fuentes paleoconservatism is inevitable, as the Groypers would like to argue. I don't think they're politically inevitable, but I do think that they're a larger constituency than a lot of people are comfortable with, and you can't ignore them fully. Subry Keller says, did I watch the Heritage Foundation respond cutting ties with Tucker Carlson because of his interview with Nick Fuentes? I basically saw them saying, like, we're not going to cut ties with Tucker Carlson, and if you care about that, you can fuck yourself, because we want, while we disagree with Nick Fuentes, we want robust debate to convert Groypers into hardcore conservatives. I think that's what I saw.
I would disagree with the Justice 35 in terms of, I think that the majority of the radicalization process that's happening on the right, to me, seems to be directly a reaction to the radicalization of the left, and the fact that the left has become so, the far left, the alt left, has become so identity racialized obsessed that it only makes sense to me logically that that's going to get a bunch of people on the right to go to the far right and also become identity racialized obsessed as well as the far
to
left.
Fight fire with fire.
Right, exactly. That just seems to be, to me, to be the logical step. I'm not sure I'm not sure I see like a 40-year pipeline. Like I would think if there's a 40-year pipeline of trying to radicalize people, it would have happened before 2025 at this point.
It's interesting because this panel, so we've got Ben Shapiro.
Mad Money Max says, do you think it's controversial to say that it should be kids' parents should be responsible for paying for their own kids' education because that's what the whole education argument is? Yeah, let's do that real quick. That could be fun. So this is what I don't like. All right, this is what I genuinely don't like. Let's do a triangle. Christian Valaris, the OG, he's going to know where I'm going with this. But I'm also going to draw a new drawing. All right, the one that goes with governance, okay? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you know it? It is a beautiful psychological concept. It says that human psychology is predictable, physiological security, social, ego, self-actualization, off of 5 tiers, and that when you can't meet your lower based needs, then it's difficult to focus on anything else. So physiological is food, water, shelter. Security is physical security and financial security. Social is like relationships. Ego is work and ambition. And self-actualization is being the best human being that you can be. And so the argument from Abraham Maslow is that if you are physiologically incapable, like if you have physiological needs, you're not going to be able to focus on social stuff. And if you have security needs, you're not going to be able to focus on social stuff. If you have any of these needs, then it's going to be difficult for you to focus on ego stuff. And then you're never going to achieve self-actualization if all of these other needs are bad. And so in my opinion, the role of the state should be to not force people. I still believe in like capital L liberalism. I still believe in capital, I still believe in maximal human freedom as much as possible. But I think that it should be the government's role to enable as many people as possible to climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because self-actualization should not just be for the rich. Becoming the best human being possible should be something that is to some degree accessible to even the working class Americans. Like if working class Americans want to read, like if they want to be good parents and read Marcus Aurelius and learn how to fly fish, and they want to take their family to Disney or Europe a couple of times in their life, then I think that kind of material wealth is not only possible in American society, I would argue that it would be good for American society if somebody who, cuts lawns, right, for $10 an hour, if they could afford to go to Disney once or twice in their lives, or if they could afford to go to Europe once or twice in their lives, if they could become educated through audiobooks, if they could do all that kind of stuff, then that's good. And that's the kind of society that we should strive for. The argument is how much government is necessary, because government is to some degree taxation and force. And so the argument is, to what degree is government necessary? Well, most people believe that it's the state's role to provide security. Okay? Most people agree that, because physical security is such a disruptive influence on all of these things that we kind of all agree that the government, even libertarians, even anarchists, will oftentimes acknowledge that the role of the state in its present form is to provide physical security so that, crime, murder, rape, abuse, all that stuff doesn't happen. We all agree there. My argument would be that while the state shouldn't necessarily decommodify basic human need, like food, water, shelter, that it's their job to make sure that this stuff is abundant. If you work 40 to 60-hour weeks, you should be able to afford food, water, and shelter. That's fair. That's part of the social contract. When it comes to social, I would argue that the state has an interest in promoting pro-social behavior, and therefore things like public education should be used as vehicles to socialize the next generation to make sure that they're economically, spiritually, physically, socially productive people. So I actually think the state has a role in this stuff. But the market, I think the market is probably best in the ego tier, because the state shouldn't regulate, in my opinion, how the market works, because it seems very bad at it. Okay. So I think the market should solve a majority of the ambition problems. And I think it should be up to the market or up to individuals, I suppose, in order to realize self-actualization. So I'm not a socialist. I don't believe in the decommodification of basic human needs or workers owning the means of production. I'm also not a communist. I don't believe in a moneyless, stateless, classless society. However, I am a statist in that I think a state should exist. And I do think it's a state's job to help people climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And so saying, oh, well, it's the parents' role. Okay, well, should you just let like orphans starve in your society because it's the parents' job? Should you not physically protect orphans because it's the parents' job to physically protect them? Should you not socialize orphans or socialize abused kids because it's the parents' job to socialize them? Ideally, of course, like parents are going to take care of the needs of their kids. Of course, the parents are going to 99% of the time protect their kids physically and financially. And of course, it's up to parents to 99% of the time socialize their kids. But if the parents are failing, is it the state's job to step in? And is it the state's job to have some level of guarantee of the fulfillment of these human needs? And my argument is yes. So I'm going to save this. Thank you for that question. Thank you for inspiring a beautiful piece of Counterpoints art. Statist fulfillment of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Thank you. Thank you, Mad Money Max. Quick show, like the stream, share it with your friends, engage with chat, super chats if you got them. It is the last day of October. You guys have been incredibly grateful. If we had a goal in October, you hit it. You borderline surpassed it. But if you want, what's his face? If you want Ken Harbaugh to be particularly impressed with how generous and loving the COG community is, please feel free to super chat or gift memberships. I appreciate you, and I thank you for being here.
We've got Michael Knowles, we've got Andrew Clavin, and Matt Walsh. And on this panel, I think two of them do believe that the left is misguided, and two of them believe that the left is evil.
Mm-hmm.
Which ones do you think think the left is evil?
Well, I know Matt Walsh thinks the left is evil.
Okay, easy pick.
I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't know if Michael Knowles thinks the left is evil.
Look, okay, well, we can argue over that, but you went for the two that I was thinking of.
I'm assuming that's who you're thinking of. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Definitely, yeah. So, and who do you think is like further right? Because it completely makes the analogy that you're giving here. I mean, it's kind of like some evidence for that analogy, because it does seem like the two guys that are the furthest right are the ones that do think the left is evil and not just misguided.
Right. But
Yeah.
even Michael Knowles, as he said to Matt Walsh, he does think that there needs to be borders. There does need to be some delineation between who's on your team and who's not on your team. He is disagreeing with Matt Walsh's position that the right should all unify and they should adopt a no enemies to the right stance. He is disagreeing. So there's actually a 3v1 on that stance.
Right.
Which I'm glad to see, because I think that stance is a
Persian Blair says J-Mac didn't like Connor constantly punching MAGA, right? Yeah. I mean, I doubt he would say that. I bet he would say like, no, you just became too much of like a liberal Democrat shill, and you were being really, really, really mean to MAGA people, and I just don't think that's good for the country. He'd probably say something like that, but yeah, realistically, like, if J-Mac replied to any of my Twitter posts, it was because he thought I was being too mean to MAGA.
terrible stance. That's the stance that allows extremism to grow and to fester and to eventually take over your movement, as it always wants to do.
Yeah, the argument that Ben Shapiro makes in this is just so good. It's such a great argument. Let's let him make it. I think he's on the verge of it now. So
Yes.
Story. There's more of a broad commentary about where we are in the movement, and as a matter of sort of morality, we all have things where, again, I'm not.
Ooh. Arigato gozaimasu, sumimasen, akimashite, batosai says, I also have a pretty boat knife, vintage Western Remington American, was 75. If you Google it, it's the full tang double wood handle. Vintage Western Remington American 75. Rule 34. Vintage Western Remington American W75 Rule 34. Ooh, that is pretty. That's very pretty. If somebody stabbed me with that, I would accept my warrior's death. That is a pretty knife. Nice. Nice, nice, nice.
I'm not saying cast into the outer darkness, right? I'm not calling for any of these people who I think everyone knows who I'm referring to, but I don't think I'm calling for any of these people to be deplatformed, removed from YouTube, or removed from Twitter. In fact, I've called for many of these people. Nick Fuentes.
Tony Coding says, bless you, buy in Milwaukee. I helped make those tools. Whenever I Googled what was the highest, the best brand for chainsaws, like what was the most powerful, what was the best built, what was the most reliable, Milwaukee, everybody was recommending Milwaukee in my internet research. CD Demoncrat says, Connor, did you change the sprocket on your chainsaw when you put the bigger bar on it? Did I change the sprocket? No, I didn't. I kept it.
For example, to actually be returned to Twitter, despite the fact that we have some pretty significant disagreements, including the fact that he thinks that I and people like me are scurrilous, sons of Satan, or whatever, however he would put it. But that is a different thing from, is this person part of, quote unquote, the movement that I belong to? And the answer there is he doesn't think I'm part of the movement that he belongs to, which he's made very clear. And so that gets into the question of there's the morality of when someone says something bad.
Rachel P says, I'm a Maslow freak. Base, dude. So can I share that real quick? So I spent my entire life, being taught the Bible by my parents and being taught history in history class, and I even took a psychology class, and I think I just must have slept or missed class the day they talked about Maslow's hierarchy, because a lot of people said that this is like one of the first thing that people learn is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I must not have been paying attention. But when I got to a leadership class in the Marine Corps, they talked about Maslow's hierarchy, and I swear to God, it was almost like a spiritual revelation, because they told the story of Abraham Maslow going to a bar and arguing with people, and he was like drunk, and he said, like, I can tell you why you do what you do when you do it. And so what I realized, maybe it was just that I was at that time and place in my life when I was still in the Marine Corps, but I realized that my physiological needs have been taken care of my entire life, and part of my motivation for joining the Marine Corps was because jihadist terrorism had made it obvious that I wasn't physically secure. Now, they attacked New York. They didn't attack Central Florida, but technically jihadists could attack anybody at any time. And so I wasn't physically secure. I didn't know how to fight. I didn't know how to shoot guns. I didn't know how to do anything because my parents were pacifists. So my anxiety around physical security caused me to say, okay, I'm going to shore up my ability to perform within the domain of physical security. And also, I mean, that shit's just interesting. Let's be real. Military, law enforcement, first response, all that shit's mad cool anyways. So I spent 8 years of my life, I did 4 years in the military, 4 years in law enforcement, effectively trying to understand the physical security tier of human psychology to the maximum degree possible. And I do think I have a pretty good command of that topic. When it comes to like financial security, I'm not going to lie, as long as I'm eating, I don't really give a shit. And then for the social tier, that's kind of what I'm working on now, realistically. I did have a lot of friends growing up. I made friends easily. I did have girlfriends growing up. I obviously was able to find my wife and trick her into marrying me and having kids with me. So I'm obviously not totally socially R-slurred. However, I can be quite abrasive. I can be a douchebag. I can be rude. I can be too honest sometimes. I can be mean. And so the social tier is kind of what I would say I've been learning it my whole life, but I'm trying to focus on now. I'm trying to be a good husband. I'm trying to be a good father. I'm trying to be a good community member. I'm trying to be a good American. And then my ego, you guys are watching me pursue my ambitions right now. I am pursuing the physiological tier and the security tier. I feel like I've maxed out. I am trying to maximize the social tier and the ego tier right now. And then self-actualization is an ongoing thing where you never really fully finish self-actualization. And also, I think self-actualization is something that is different at each tier of life. I think being the best kid you can be is not the same as being the best young adult you can be. Being the best young adult you can be is not the same as being the best middle-aged adult that you can be. And being the best middle-aged adult that you can be is not the same as being the best old person that you can be. And so what self-actualization looks like at different stages of life is completely different. And what I would say is I'm psychologically transitioning from the young adult to the middle-aged adult tier, and I'm trying to be the best middle-aged adult I can. And I'm scared of death, guys. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to die. I wish I could live forever. I wish I could. I really enjoy existence. I really enjoy existence. I enjoy life. I enjoy food. I enjoy my friends. I never want to lose it because I genuinely love life. I think it's really cool. And so I wish I didn't have to die. But one of the things that I'm going to try to focus on, especially when I get older, when I get like 60 years plus, if I don't have serious health issues, and presuming that I live that long, and I don't have serious health issues, I'm going to try to focus on being the best old person I can be. I'll try to be a mentor. I'll try to help out in the community. I'll try to be active. I'll try to be a community advocate. I'll try not to let my ego, basically force me to yell at young people and tell them why they're wrong and stupid. I'll do that when I think it's a public service and it's necessary, but I'm not going to try to be so egotistical as to presume that the way that I perceive the world is fundamentally correct, because I see a lot of old people guilty of that. So yeah. I'm a Rachel P says I'm a Maslow freak. Me too. Maslow's hierarchy of needs was almost a spiritual revelation to me.
Bad. Should you condemn it? And I think that as a general matter, you can do what Winsome Sears did, right? Winsome Sears is running against the attorney general candidate in Virginia. She was asked about the Politico chat. She said, yeah, that's bad. Now you do Jay Jones, which seems to me like a pretty good answer and a good way of policing. Well, and then when it comes to the pragmatic,
can I say just you were in the group chat?
Yeah. I mean, Drew, sorry, one more point on the, I just want to make one more point here and then you can say whatever you want. On the pragmatic side, I fundamentally disagree with this idea that the reason that the right, quote unquote, loses is because we fragment while the left is unified. The left is losing because it unified around its crazies. Do not unify around your crazies. Sure, the crazies can vote for you. They can vote for your party. You can't stop them from doing that. It's a free country. But that doesn't mean they should have like a decisive voice.
I don't know enough about John Locke. I have to read more. I technically haven't read Leviathan. I don't think I've read The Wealth of I think I've read excerpts from The Wealth of Nations. Obviously, I read a biography on Burke, but there's plenty of like Enlightenment or pre-Enlightenment thinkers that are fundamental to the way the Western world works, and I just haven't read firsthand sources. I'm like passingly aware of Locke. And I'm also passingly aware of, hold on. What's because there's two books, John Locke's most famous books. So, Concerning Human Understanding, Treatises of Government, A Letter Concerning Tolerance or Toleration, it says. And then there's a dueling book with Leviathan. So Leviathan author. Why is it Hobbes? So I guess I'm a Hobbesian. Although I guess I need to read Hobbes in order to be a Hobbesian. And then I guess I need to read Locke in order to find out whether or not Hobbes is correct. But correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't John Locke and Hobbes effectively like dueling philosophers? John Locke. So it looks like Hobbes was 1588 to 1679. John Locke, time he was alive. Weren't they dueling philosophers? Weren't they effectively like complementary arguments? 1632 to 1704. Yeah. Yeah. So I need to read Hobbes and Locke. I'm familiar, but I haven't read the original sources.
In the future of the movement, because if you do that, you end up with the trans movement running the Democratic Party, and you lose from here to forever. It's the Democratic solidarity that's destroying them, not the Democrats as a sort of fragmentary party.
Hang on, let me.
Don't unify around your crazies. Should be as prominent.
Andy B says, you're not going to like this, but a huge portion of the poor are poor because of the poor choices they make to keep them poor. Sources, I grew up poor and saw that everyone around me did. Yeah, but I think that that's part of education. Education is not just arithmetic and learning how to write. It's also a moral education. So you could grow up in a poor community that has all sorts of like culturally fucked up shit. Like, no offense, but like gangster culture in the black community is real and it's absolutely toxic as fuck. So gangster culture, young male black culture can be toxic as fuck. And so it would be my opinion that people in the hood should still get food stamps. That way, you know, they don't starve to death. But most people should work 40 to 60 hours a week in order to earn their bread. Then for the security tier, I think law enforcement shouldn't treat people on the wrong side of town as enemies. They should try to get the predatory criminals away from the civilian population as much as possible, which is how you guarantee the security tier. And then for the social tier, I think that part of public education should be a moral education. Don't lie. Don't steal. This is how you treat your friends. This is how you treat your family. This is how you work a job. This is how you pay your bills. This is how you pay your taxes. So for me, if you're saying that like people in the hood are trapped because they have bad behaviors when it comes to these three tiers, I think it's the state's job to educate at the social tier via public education to break the cycle of bad behavior. Okay. I know it's not going to work. I know you're not going to get everybody, but my mom was a teacher at a predominantly black school, and she saved people from themselves. And I also, even in my limited role as a school resource officer, I was able to help troubled kids get off of the bad path. So it's absolutely possible to help people save themselves. You can't save people, but you can help people save themselves.
It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
It really should be. That should be like base politics right there.
Yes. And it should be so obvious because again,
Christian Blair says, what do orphans and blind kids have in common? Neither one of them can see their parents. Woof.
when Trump won, this was the argument that everyone on the right pointed to. They said the left unified around their crazies. They allowed the crazies to control the conversation. This is why Kamala Harris, example of what I was exactly talking about in the beginning of this, Kamala Harris was too afraid to be specific on the whole transing the prisoners conversation or transing the illegal immigrants conversation. And because of that, she comes off as this fucking crazy person. She's allowing the crazies to dictate the conversation. And when the right, I think correctly, pointed out that that was a big factor in helping Donald Trump win, why would you then turn around and be like, oh, well, we should allow our crazies to dictate the conversation with us?
True. Sitch spitting truth again.
Yeah, it's definitely a bad strategy. Well, I keep going back to the one interview that we saw with Kamala Harris where it was all the super far left journalists and they kept asking her all these super far left questions and she did not push back at all. She let them walk all over her, which made her look weak, and it made everyone think, oh yeah, this is what she's going to do when she gets in office. All of her far left radicals are basically going to be running the ship. And I never saw that in Trump at all.
No.
Trump, as much as the left would try to paint Trump as doing that, I think he did a decent job of standing up to the really far right people, especially not like on the abortion thing.
Right. He would play ignorance about something.
To some extent, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Like, I don't know who David Duke is. And then you have a clip of him knowing exactly who David Duke is, or I know who the Proud Boys are, right?
But there was never
CD Democrat is saying get a different sprocket. Okay.
anything like that on the
Yes,
left,
but it was
though.
not.
Yes.
It was nowhere near as bad as it was with Kamala, or I'd say just the general Democrat Party, in terms of allowing the
Yeah. Randy. So true, man. Fast forward 15 years. Hey, Connor. Connor here with your Destiny Dick helicopter traffic update. No, that's gonna happen, man. It's gonna happen because when you're talking about these things, man. I know Rachel P and I we're having a moment, but when you're talking about these things, it applies to everything. Okay, Stephen. I would like to say I'm working on my social aspect. Stephen isn't interested in working on his social aspect. He jumped a tier, but he's suffering in this social aspect. So his physical security is excellent. He has excellent physical security in Miami. He has excellent financial security. So this tier is filled, okay? Physiological, he doesn't take care of himself the way that he should. He's probably not maxing out this tier, but he has food, he has water, he has shelter. So he has sufficient levels at this tier. And then with an ego, probably the reason why he justifies his maladaptive social behaviors is because he's so successful within the ego tier that if he suffers in the social tier, who cares? Because he's so successful here. But I think everybody sees that the social tier, Destiny's maladaptive behavior here, is affecting his ego and affecting his security. And I think that's part of the reason why Steven is such a character who's interesting to talk about, is because, like, if you don't have maladaptive behavior, you're actually, generally speaking, not the topic of a drama, because the drama is like, oh, okay, he said something cringe. Okay, whatever, who cares? But if you have maladaptive behaviors throughout these tiers, people are going to talk about you because you're crazy. Grandpa Connor will embrace not wanting to institutionalize Bonnie Blue. That's what you think. That's what you think. I think Grandpa Connor is going to be going harder in some areas.
The crazies to run wild all over them and then just bend over for it. That's why you had the video of everyone, kneeling for the BLM protest and all that other stuff.
Even if Kamala did that, was like, oh, I don't necessarily know who all these Marxists are. At least it's acknowledged.
John Locke, the political theorist. Nice. All right. So, let's wrap this. We're going to be moving into Valor Reacts. I do appreciate Sitch Adam. They didn't give me too hard of a time today. I do agree with a substantive amount of what they said, and Adam wasn't particularly frustrating, at least not as far as I heard. So, anyways, people are still freaking out about, number one, me calling out JD Vance, me making a joke about Charlie Kirk's assassination, and then the Steven tweet. The Steven tweet, they hate it. They hate it. They hate the Steven tweet. I want to thank you guys for your viewership support, but I also want to thank you for your financial support. September and October were phenomenal. Even though we're like 100 viewer stream, we punch way above our weight class. So thank you.